Have you thought about growing your wealth but don't know how to start? Talk to Invest by Metricon. They make property investing easy. So for all your tomorrows, build your financial future today. Invest by Metricon. Build wealth. Build today.
This is a Momentum Media production.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
Okay, how you going? Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us. Phil Tarrant here, your host of the Smart Property Investment Show. I've been doing this for about 5 years now, and I don't know how many episodes I've done, but I reckon there's a lot. Whether or not we got that our 1000th episode yet, I'm going to go and get the team to check that out. But we cover a lot of ground on this podcast. We've been able to map and monitor property markets for the last 5 years, up and down and left and right. We all know now that we're in a bit of a boom town time for property in Australia, and it looks like it's going to stay with us a little bit longer. Interest rates are pretty stable. Some people are talking about negative interest rates. Who knows? See what plays out there. And as it would appear, the roadmap for coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic is clear. The Prime Minister is right behind it. We're now starting to see some of the state premiers behave and get on board, in particular with New South Wales, opening up the place, getting everyone vaccinated. I've had my double jab back, so I'll be ready to roll. At Momentum Media, we'll probably do about 30 events, 35 events this year as soon as things open up. So we're going to be ready to go. But this is a property show. We're talking about property and the many ways in which you can secure property in Australia. If you've been tuning into the Smart Property Investment Show for many years, you'll know that I use a buyer's agent for the majority of my purchases, and I do it for a whole bunch of different reasons. I'm not going to go into it today. You can go and listen to the umpteen number of podcasts I've done around it, but things are changing. Buyer's agents are getting more popular, and I'd like to think that Smart Property Investment has played its role supporting the not the birth, but the sort of the growth of this sector over the last decade, as more and more people are leaning on experts to help them make more informed property decisions, particularly in a market like this where the potential for overpaying is high, the buying the wrong asset at the wrong time is high, and buyer's agents really help out with that. So we like to have those conversations. We're behind the buyer's agent sector, but that's changing as well, the way in which it takes place, and you're getting some more sophisticated businesses emerging around the buyer's agent space, which is the intersection with prop tech. We're going to get into that today. Joining me in the studio, Pete Wargent. He's from a company. He's a director of Buyers Buyers, and the URL is buyersbuyers.com.au. There's a lot of buyers. Pete, you like buyers. You're a buyer's agent, are you? Or once upon a time?
Yeah, that's right. I've been in the property industry for over a decade now, and cut my teeth as an individual buyer's agent. Started out as a one-man band, just me, and then one business partner. And then, more recently, we've founded Buyers Buyers, and that is a nationwide property buying company, so slight change of model. And as you said, I think it's becoming more and more popular in Australia now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know the numbers, and I've asked for it. I don't think it exists. No one's really collecting it. How many buyer's agents now touch a real estate transaction in Australia? I don't know whether it's at the buying or the selling side. It must be growing. It must be emerging, but I still think it's relatively a small number. So this is something that will grow over time. You only need to think back to the mortgage industry. 15 years ago, mortgage brokers were about 23% of the market. Now they're well over 60%. So these are Australian consumers seeking home loans using mortgage brokers. So the more people use mortgage brokers than don't now, whether or not that's going to end up with buyer's agents in the future. And I need to look at America, and there's an advocate on both sides of the transaction there. You have a seller's agent and a buyer's agent. So whether or not we're going to go that way, who knows? It's still early days. But Pete, so you're originally a buyer's agent. Now you were in the business of prop tech. Is that pretty much what you do?
Yeah, that's it. I think, going all the way back, I was originally a chartered accountant. So I had a professional services background. I was a director at Deloitte, but like a lot of accountants, was looking for something more interesting to do. So transitioned into real estate around 2011. So I'd been an investor for a long time. And I think part of my thinking was that being a buyer's agent, seeing all of that stuff at the coalface, it could only make me a better investor over time, which I think it has. And eventually that segued into Buyers Buyers over the last couple of years. So I've had a mixed career, but property since 2011 full time. And as you said, I think the industry is growing. I think, maybe around 3% of transactions now might go through a buyer's agent. It's obviously a cyclical industry as well. But as you touched on there, if you go to the States, in some parts of America, it might be more than half of transactions involve a buying agent at some level. So not necessarily the full end-to-end service, though. But I think you pretty much touched on the reason for us founding Buyers Buyers. If you went back all the way to the early 90s, there was maybe only 5% of transactions went through mortgage brokers, and then the aggregators came along and the internet came along. And as you said, these days it's more than 60%. But our vision for property buying services is very similar. I think we can aggregate, we can grow the industry, and by offering a range of products for all circumstances and all budgets, then that is our vision over time, that most people will use a buyer's agent.
Well, it's largely, at least at owner-occupier level, probably the biggest purchasing decision you ever making. And for property investors, you're in a business. It is a business running an investment portfolio, hence the reason why you get tax deductions at the moment around negative gearing. It is a business, and the best property investors I know do consider investing in property as a business. It's not a hobby. And this is something that will continue over time. And you want to make informed decisions. Not all investment properties are created equal. So finding the right property in the right place at the right time to meet your portfolio is the key. And that's how you go about this pathway, which is what most property investors do it for, is wealth creation. But you mentioned you were a property investor before you moved into property as a career, Pete. Can you give me some sense for your portfolio, mate?
Yeah, so I guess as you can hear, obviously from a British background. So it's actually my wife that got me into real estate. Being an accountant, I was much more interested in stocks originally, but I begrudgingly had to admit that she'd been getting better results than me with her property investment. So she started out in a place called Cambridge in the United Kingdom, which is, I guess, 45 minutes from London, famous university city. And I could see when we first met, her property portfolio was burgeoning. So I guess because of our background, our portfolio in residential property is roughly equally split between half a dozen properties in the UK and half a dozen in Australia, largely in Sydney, and more recently in Brisbane and Victoria. But our most recent purchases have actually been outside of resi. So I know you've talked on previous podcasts about how people transition towards more cash flow based investments. Our last few purchases have actually been farmland. So a bit of a mixed portfolio. And my vision has always been just to create this big snowball and try and invest in whatever asset class at wealth producing rates of return. And I don't mind whether that's property, shares, or investing in my own business. Just keep finding ways to move forward.
Yeah. And you're investing in farmland now. What, you're sort of running dairy farms or something like that, or chickens, or what, llamas, or what is it?
No, we're actually vegans. So okay. Yeah, there's no chook farms. But my wife's actually from a farming background, which is hence why we got interested in the asset class to begin with, because we actually inherited some farmland. But it's all cropland for us and some woodland. So we don't do cows or chooks or anything like that. And I guess more into the organic side of things going forward. Yeah. It's an interesting asset class, and it's not for everybody. But in the UK, it's very tax effective. There's no inheritance tax. You can do certain transactions CGT free, and there's also grants from Europe. But that's a whole separate subject, and it's not for everybody. But I guess we've transitioned away from resi in recent years a little bit.
Well, you find most investors do that. They build out a solid residential portfolio, which allow to leverage or step up into other types of assets. And no doubt in the UK, Clarkson's Farms probably done a great thing for people now wanting to be farmers and thinking they can make a dough out of. I watched the first season of that. I think he made a couple of pound after all that hard work and toil. But you can make a few bucks in farming, no doubt. Yeah,
it's funny you mentioned that, actually, because not so very long ago, and I know you talked about Instagram influencers the other day. I'm certainly not one of those, but you'll actually see on my Instagram feed there, I bumped into old mate Caleb from Clarkson's Farm, and we did a little selfie. So it's a beautiful part of the country down there in the Cotswolds. But most of our resi portfolio is really London and Sydney centric. So we focus very much on capital growth investments in the early days. We're both higher income earners, both for our sins, directors in the accounting world. So most of our resi portfolio is really capital city based. It's only recently that we've transitioned.
And tell me about the day where you took the suit off at Deloitte's and become a buyer's agent. Was there a big gap between the two, or was it like, I'm done with this, I'm sick of looking at financial accounts or management consulting, whatever you were doing, and and become a buyer's agent?
Yeah, it was definitely that. I actually had a couple of years in industry as a group FC, so I worked in mining for a while, but I guess I was still grappling and trying to find something that grabbed me. And forgive me if you've heard this story before, anyone tuning in, but we actually took about 15 months off to go traveling. So we didn't really have a set goal, I guess, when we set off, when we ditched the suit. So I just knew I was going to go and do something different. So we drove the big lap around Australia. So got a few insights into all of the property markets around the country, I guess, on the way around. And then we also did a world voyage, world cruise with Cunard. So managed to get around to 30 odd countries. It was only really at that point that I was like, well, gee whiz, what am I actually going to do now? So I became a buyer's agent. I've written half a dozen books over the years. So I've kept myself busy, but it was certainly a big mindset change getting away from the 9 to 5. And I think I always knew I wasn't destined to be a chartered accountant. I think it's a good career. And certainly it's an excellent base for understanding business, but I was never really designed to be an office person 9 to 5, I don't think.
Yeah, and a lot of people aren't. I think one of the positive outcomes from this COVID-19 pandemic is a lot of people have a lot more COVID clarity, and they can now appreciate the opportunities or options they have available for them. And if you're in those roles where you can have a foot in both camps, you can come into the office or you can choose not to go in the office. I think that are the attractive jobs of the future. Let's get into buyers. We'll just go to a break beforehand. Stay with us, everyone. Back in a moment.
Are you wondering where to buy an investment property right now? Why not let Buyers take the guesswork out of it? We can find you the right place on or off market at the right price. An investment professional from our national network of buyers agents can help you save time, money and stress and deliver you a tailored solution. Talk to us today. Call 1800 975 051 or visit buyersbuyers.com.au.
Welcome back, everyone. Phil Tarrant, host of the Smart Property Investment Show. I'm with Pete Wargent from Buyers, buyersbuyers.com.au. So buyer's agent becomes prop tech. Let's start at what Buyers does. Pete, can you give me a quick 101 on the platform?
Yeah, so we have a national panel of buyer's agents. So a little bit like what happened in the mortgage industry. Some aggregators came along like Aussie Home Loans and Mortgage Choice and AFG, and they became an aggregator for the industry. So it's a similar model in some respects. So we have buyer's agents in every state and every territory. We've got nationwide buying power, so we can buy anywhere in the country, capital city or regional. We offer the range of products for all circumstances and budgets. So we have, for people who don't know what to do about their next step, we have a product called We Plan, which is an affordable 10-year property plan. We offer the traditional end-to-end buyer's agency service, which we call We Find. So people looking for, say, off-market or pre-market properties, that's an ideal sort of service to take on. We also have a hybrid model, which is something we do that's a bit different. So for people who've identified the property they want to buy, so particularly first home buyers are using this a lot, we have a much cheaper product called We Buy, which is just due diligence, negotiation and acquisition. So it's a much cheaper product and much more akin to what you might get from a buying agent, say, in the US. So there's a few different products for all circumstances and all budgets, and therefore we do offer some more affordable services.
And I'll sort of nerd out for a little bit because I'm sort of quite into prop tech. I also know mortgage aggregation pretty well. And what normally happens there is that you have individual broking businesses operating as sole traders, or they might be in partnerships or PTY type organizations, and they sit under the umbrella of an aggregator that gives them access to product and marketing and commission flow and all this sort of stuff. It gives them access to the banks to do their job. So you're embracing a similar model to that. So are all the brokers that operate inside buyers individual businesses and they just sit under a national umbrella? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so we've got a range of buyers agencies that sit on our panel. And in terms of the actual model, so as you said, it's a different model from what most buyers agencies do. So the traditional model in Australia, it's quite often one person or two people start out in a buyer's agency, and as they grow, they might hire a couple of extra buyers over time. We've come at it from a different angle. So it's actually a guy I knew in the industry from a previous association called Doron Peleg. He was the founder of a company called Riskwise Property Research previously. And it was him who brought me the idea for Buyers. So we actually went away, we established the business, we built out the panel, and we sort of proved the model. And then we went away and actually raised capital from investors. So we've got some high profile investors from Australia's largest tech firm, for example. So we actually raised a few $1 million from the market. So that has actually helped us to build out the tech. We've got some big firepower on the marketing side of the business, which we'll deploy over the coming year. As you said, that actually is a benefit to the buyer's agents on our panel, because we can actually bring them pre-approved buyers who are ready to buy today. I think certainly as a buyer's agent in my early days, I spent most of my time trying to find clients, trying to find people who are actually willing to buy property instead of doing what I was actually good at, which was transacting. So we solved that problem for buyer's agents. And for the property buyers out there, we've got a range of market research tools and insights that you can use for free on our website. So we really help people to decide where and what they should buy with their available budget, so that when we hand them over to the buyer's agent, they're good to go and they know exactly what they want to buy.
So that's an interesting point. So I guess it lends itself to my earlier analysis on the growth of buyer's agents in Australia. Is the thing stopping it is more consumers understanding the value of using a buyer's agent, and what you're trying to do is put that on overdrive by centralising, I guess, that discussion and highlighting that. So finding buyer's agents, clients who want to use a buyer's agent, is where you're focusing it. For the buyer's agents that sit inside buyers, are you on the pathway, because every buyer's agent Australia probably listen to this podcast, but are you looking for more buyer's agents to join the panel, or is it more about educating property investors that they should be considering a buyer's agent and then providing that matching service into the buyer's agent?
Oh, look, it's both. We're certainly looking to grow the panel over time. And there are certain parts of the country where we actually find it still, even now, difficult to find coverage. I think the capital cities tend to be pretty well serviced by buyer's agents, but there are still some parts of the country, as you get into the more remote or regional markets, where it's difficult to get coverage. So we're definitely looking to continue growing the panel. I think in terms of why more people don't use buyer's agents, there's a few different aspects to it. One is there is certainly an education piece there, and you guys at SPI have done probably as much as anybody over the years to grow the awareness of the industry and the benefits of using a buyer's agent professional. But there's also, in my experience over the past decade, there's a certain cohort who just won't pay the full buyer's agent fee. And that's where our WeBuy product comes in, because sometimes people are looking for a more affordable service where potentially they do half of the legwork or find the property, and the buyer's agent just helps with the transaction itself. So there's a few different reasons why it hasn't got a bigger penetration, but it's definitely a growing market. And I think over time, the market share will continue to grow.
So is your, thesis or proposition the fact that the best person to buy the property in a location is someone that's inside that location? Because a lot of buyer's agents will say, well, we buy Australia-wide. It doesn't matter where we're particularly located. We can travel to every single market. Are you saying it's better done sort of with a geographic sort of centralisation?
Yeah, with the greatest respect to anybody who flies interstate to buy property, I would always say you'll never be as experienced in a local market as somebody who buys there regularly. It's just, that is just the reality. And I know that from my own experience as somebody who's licensed in New South Wales and Queensland. I relocated from Sydney about 6 or 7 years ago. It takes time to get to understand the local nuances. So, as you know, regulations are different in each state and territory in Australia, for better or worse. So I think if you're an investor looking to buy interstate, you'll be far better served to use somebody who's local to that market. They're just going to have more expertise and better connections with the local agents. There's a lot of stuff just at the local and on the ground level that's it's very difficult to do remotely, just understanding the best streets and the best aspect and all of those local nuances that it's very difficult for somebody based interstate to get across.
What's your feel for the market now, Pete? Is there not enough buyer's agents to service demand, or is we oversubscribed with buyer's agents at the moment and we need to sort of make more people who want to use buyer's agents?
Yeah, it's a very cyclical industry. So it's interesting, when I started out in 2011, I'm thinking back to that time, there was people like Tracy Chandler, Chris Gray, Rich Harvey, maybe Metropole in Sydney, but there was nowhere near the same number of buyer's agents that there are today. I think Sydney in particular went through that property boom from 2012. A lot more people came across to the buying side. The demand for use of buyer's agents is pretty cyclical. At the moment, it's red hot. There's loads of demand for buyer's agents. There's restrictions in some states. A lot of people are trying to buy in Southeast Queensland and they're based down south. So at the moment, most buyer's agents are absolutely flat out. But we do know from experience that real estate is a cyclical industry, and particularly so for investors because they tend to amplify the cycles. I think things will level out again over time. I think you touched on it right back at the beginning. There's not always been the firm numbers on the number of buyer's agents in the sector because people can sort of transition between being a real estate agent and a buyer's agent under the same license. So there's never really that level of clarity as to how many agents there are in the market at any given time. But it does tend to, supply and demand tends to level out, and it does tend to self-correct.
Yeah, and look, we all know the property market at the moment is hot, and the reason why is that not a lot of stock on market, and that should change over time. We'll get into that, but in terms of the PropTech side of buyers, I'm a bit of a nerd, so I want to get into it. Let's go to another break. Stay with us, back in a moment.
The mark of financial success isn't about getting bigger, better, faster, or more. To Paul, success is freedom. Freedom to spend more time with his family, or giving back to his community, or just more time to go surfing. Paul Glossop, an award-winning property buyer and regular guest on the Smart Property Investment Podcast, has taken the lessons he's learned building a multi-million-dollar property portfolio and laid them out in his best-selling book, A Surfer's Guide to Property Investing. For a limited time, get your free copy of Paul's award-winning book and receive a roadmap for building both lifestyle and wealth through property investing. Grab your free copy today at purepropertyinvestment.com.
Welcome back, everyone. Phil Tarrant, host of the Smart Property Investment Show with Pete Wargent, Buyers, director, buyers.com.au. Now, Pete, how do you know, and this sort of goes to the question around whether or not there's enough buyers agents in the market to cater for current demand, or the more buyers agents you have means that you can cultivate greater demand. How do you know whether or not a buyer's agent is good for you to consider them for your panel? What sort of checks and balances do you go through?
Yeah, there's a few different things. I mean, obviously, we prefer to have buyer's agents with a certain level of experience. I think, with the best will in the world, it does take time to learn the craft, so to speak, and we all had to start somewhere. But generally, we like to see a decent level of experience, particularly for the principal of the buyer's agent. We only really want to work with buyer's agents who are fully independent. So a straight fee-for-service model. We don't really go in for the sort of off-the-plan or commission-based purchasing model. And generally speaking, we want people who are just going to act in the best interest of the buyers. So that's part of our customer charter, that we always act with integrity and try to do the right thing. So there's a few different aspects to it. And you mentioned the PropTech side of the business. So we have a number of investors. We've got a couple of guys on our board from the tech firm Atlassian. So they're sort of overseeing us growing out our tech parts of the business. And one of the things we do is we have a little rating system. So when customers go through the process of buying with us, they give us a automatic feedback. So we can see quite clearly there's a lot of transparency. And if we have buyer's agents that aren't performing for whatever reason, then we'll find out about it pretty quickly. So there's a lot of checks and balances that we're putting in place there to make sure that we always try to do the best thing for the client.
And do you have any sort of direct buyer's agents, or they're all independents that sit under your umbrella? If you look at mortgages, sometimes you have sort of in-house brokers and then external brokers. How are you going to sort of approach that moving forward?
Yeah, at the moment, they're all independent. So we did talk about the idea of having an in-house buyer's agent almost like as a utility. So if we've got unusual transactions that nobody can service for whatever reason. So we have contemplated it. At the moment, everybody's independent who sits on our panel. And touch wood, we've been able to service all of the required transactions at this point in time. I can see a situation, though, there are certain parts of the country where there are literally no buyer's agents, parts of the Northern Territory and so on. So I think in that circumstance, we would probably need to engage a local real estate agent or do some kind of a desktop solution. We can actually execute on what's needed.
And I guess you've got a platform approach, and you need to look at examples all over the place of how platforms work. Your Uber Eats, for example, you've got it's a tech platform that has a number of different service suppliers inside of it who deliver your food or drive you to wherever you need to go. So you've standardized in many ways the pricing around buyer's agents, and you've got your three different sort of solutions depending on the levels of sophistication an investor might need. But so that's completely standardized, irrespective of where you're buying or how you're buying?
Yeah, so the fees are a little bit higher in Sydney and Melbourne as compared to the rest of the country, but we've tried to standardize the fees as much as possible. So for the WeBuy sort of due diligence, negotiation and acquisition service, that just comes in at a straight fixed fee. For the full end-to-end service, so there is a little bit of movement on the fees, depending on the nature of the engagement. But to the extent possible, we're trying to standardize that. And we can generally come in a little bit cheaper than you might get from going to a buyer's agent direct. So we do offer a slightly more affordable service. And that's partly because of the centralization, the scalability, and our mass marketing campaign obviously helps us to bring in leads much more easily because we do spend quite heavily on digital marketing spend.
And then sort of the front of the tech platform largely is it really understanding what investors, what owner-occupiers as well need and want, and therefore using the magic that is the marvels of coding, et cetera, to match them with the appropriate buyer's agent in appropriate area. So going through that process, do you actually identify the sort of asset you should be buying and where you should be buying it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different aspects to the PropTech, and it obviously does improve over time the more data that we get. So artificial intelligence and machine learning, that's going to be a big part of what we do. So it's partly for the market research and insights, and we've got a load of free property tools on the website that you can check out there, buyersbuyers.com.au. So we've got things like free valuation reports, we've got regional reports and suburb risk reports. All of that stuff is free. But we also use the PropTech, the AI and the machine learning to, as you said, for screening inquiries, for matching to the right buyer's agent. We're building out a buyer's agent portal, so that will help to digitize the transaction much more, because I think the days of printing off 50-page contracts and initialing every page, I think hopefully we can farewell those days fairly soon, and just helping to streamline the whole customer journey to make the purchase process less stressful.
And what are you doing at the upskilling and training level for attracting the next generation of buyer's agents into Australia? Are you doing any work there?
Well, it's not really in our remit. In saying that, though, we've obviously been active. I've been in the industry for a decade. So I've been a long-term advocate of growing the industry. I often speak at industry events. But it's for buyers, actually training up new buyer's agents isn't really what we do. We generally just aggregate the experts who are already in the industry. But I think over time, actually, we will need more buyer's agents in the industry, and it's definitely an area we'd like to look at.
Yeah, and look, you see a lot of people coming out of residential sales now into becoming buyer's agents. It's something we've been right behind it for many years, championing the growth of buyer's agents, because the reason why is that we want investors in particular to make better outcomes. I see people blow their dough on property, and I just shake my head sometimes and thinking there's so many resources out there now to stop you making ill-informed investment decisions. But time and time again, Pete, you must see it, people making the wrong calls. So anything we can do to help Australians make better buying decisions and therefore create wealth and whatever that sort of gives to them, it depends who they are, it's pretty important. Give me some sense for this business in 5 years' time, Pete.
Yeah, so our vision is really to grow the market share of buyers using buyer's agents from around about 3% today. We would love to see that figure closer to 10%. So we're not trying to cannibalize the industry or anything like that. We want to see the industry growing so that there's a bigger pie and buyer's agents active in the market. And as you said, a lot of it is it's just helping people make the right decisions. You said there about people making the wrong call. And as you said, it's the biggest transaction that many people ever get involved in. And it's heartbreaking when people come to you to do, like our 10-year property plan, and they say, well, I bought this place off the plan and it didn't work out. And, they took an ill-advised decision, and it can really set people back years in terms of their progress. So helping people to make the right decisions, I think that is a virtuous circle and it benefits everybody. Yeah.
And, the numbers, I think most property investors only own between 1 and 2 properties. And one of the key reasons why they do that, not necessarily about how much money they earn, it's largely because they buy the wrong property first. And this is something which is critical. And if you're tuning into this and you're embarking out on being a property investor, the first 1 or 2 properties are critical because you get them right, they leverage you into a lot of better properties into the future. And that's where a buyer's agent can really help you. Pete, I've really enjoyed the chat. So good to have a discussion, mate. Make sure you keep connected, keep engaged. And I guess the message I'm hearing is that there's both sides of the supply and demand equation here. For those who aren't using buyer's agent, this might be the first port of call to actually understand what is available for them and to find a buyer's agent who might be appropriate to them. And then on the other side, for buyer's agents who already have established businesses who are looking to expand them and grow them and potentially find new customers, probably worthwhile getting in touch with you. What's the best way? Just go to the website, Pete?
Yeah, that's right. buyersbuyers.com.au. If you want to email me direct, pete.wargent@buyersbuyers.com.au. So pretty easy to track down online these days. But yeah, as you said, we're looking to grow the business and grow the buyer's agent panel. And as somebody who's used buyer's agents myself in the past, I will always be a huge advocate. That's really helped me on my journey. And it's the same, no doubt, for a lot of investors starting out.
Yeah, any high-profile buyer's agents have joined the panel?
Oh yeah, we've got some fabulous agents on the panel. We like to work with the best. So Rich Harvey in New South Wales from Property Buyer, Claire Corby, who is the Buyer's Agent of the Year and a big advocate of the Reba Group, Jess Ellum in Adelaide, number one agent down there. So we've got some fantastic agents on the panel. We just see our job as growing the awareness for the industry, and there's more work to go around. So that's our vision for 5 years' time. As you said, we just want to see more people benefiting from using these experts and all of their knowledge.
Well, go and check them out, buyersbuyers.com.au. Hope you enjoyed that, everyone. It's always good to rethink how ways and the way the current things are done and doing a different application of it. So good to see PropTech now finding its way inside the buyer's agent sector. There's a whole bunch of other conversations like this around buyer's agents. Just wherever you listen to this, just flick through the feed. There's podcasts galore, if not days of podcasts if you want to binge on it. And as we come out of lockdown, you start getting back in your car, driving places. A good way to inform yourself and educate in the process of going about your day-to-day. Remember, smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Social media, Smart Property HQ is where you'll find us. Favour of me, please, if you like what we're doing, keep those reviews coming. Wherever you listen to this podcast, the team get a real kick out of it. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
In the property investment industry, there's countless stories of the one that got away. And it's always the same reason. To pay the deposit, they needed the settlement from another property to come through, and they waited. Realty Assist Australia knows that when you find the one, waiting isn't an option. That's why they have a same-day settlement fund advance service. There's no credit check, no application fees, just a single one-off fee to advance your equity. Visit realtyassist.com.au/settlements now.